The quiet streets of Fall Creek glistened faintly under the soft glow of early evening lamps, their light reflecting off the freshly dampened pavement after a brief rain. The neighborhood, an enclave of meticulously kept townhouses and manicured lawns, usually buzzed with the low hum of evening chatter and the occasional bark of a dog. But tonight, as the library's closing bell had just tolled, a different kind of tension hung in the air, unseen, yet palpable. Trey Marshall, a tall, wiry black teenager in a worn gray hoodie, clutched two heavy law books in his arms. American Criminal Law and History of Supreme Court Decisions. The leather bindings were cracked from use, but the pages within gleamed with the promise of knowledge. He was late leaving the library, but determined to get home quickly, moving briskly across the quiet street. Music from his lo-fi headphones muted the world, just enough to hear his footsteps, but not the whispered judgments trailing him. He didn't know that behind the darkened windows of the grand mansion overlooking the street, eyes were watching. Sharon Brooks, a woman in a pristine white robe and a phone clutched tightly in one hand, peered out from behind her curtain. Her face was a study in suspicion, the tightness around her eyes betraying a deep-seated fear. "There's a kid here I don't know," she muttered to herself, lips barely moving. "Why is he wandering around this neighborhood? What's he looking for?" Her fingers trembled as she punched 911 into her phone, her voice barely above a whisper as she relayed a vague but alarmist report. "There's a young black male, hoodie up, carrying a backpack. He's lingering near the houses. I think he might be casing the place. Maybe planning a break-in." Minutes later, the flashing blue and red lights of a police cruiser cut through the night. Officers Carter and Marlowe stepped out, their faces set with professional calm, but eyes sharp, scanning the street. "Trey, stop right there! Hands where we can see them!" Officer Carter's voice boomed in the still air. Frozen, Trey raised his hands slowly. He'd been prepared for this, too many times before. His breath hitched, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm just going home. I live here. Here's my student ID." He reached for his back pocket. "Don't move! Hands off the body!" Carter snapped, stepping forward. Trey's fingers twitched, but he obeyed, palms open and raised. His legs felt like lead, every nerve screaming. Outside, Sharon watched with a small, cruel smile curling at her lips. "I told you," she said aloud. "He was hiding something in his backpack." The officers started a search. Trey felt tears sting his eyes but fought them back. This wasn't the first time. No one listened when he tried to explain. "I'm a student. I'm studying law." "Look," he wanted to say. But the words got swallowed by the cold authority of the officers. Behind his ear, the tiny action camera his mother had given him was still recording. A silent witness to the injustice. It was a shield he hoped would someday protect him when the world wouldn't. Suddenly, the roar of a sleek black Tesla Model X broke through the tension. The car slid to a stop by the curb. The door opened, and out stepped a woman with the posture of a soldier, even off duty. Tall, imposing, and calm. Her dark navy suit was impeccable. Her silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun that spoke of discipline and order. This was Evelyn Marshall, retired Air Force colonel, and most importantly, Trey's mother. Her voice rang clear and commanding. "What's going on here?" Officer Carter turned sharply, one hand still resting near his holster. "Ma'am, please don't interfere. I am Colonel Evelyn Marshall, United States Air Force, retired, and this young man is my son. Remove your hands from him, immediately," she said, each word crisp as a drill command. Sharon's smug smile faltered. The junior officer, Marlowe, took a step back, clearly intimidated. Carter's eyes dropped briefly as Evelyn continued. "We received a complaint from your neighbor," Carter began cautiously. Evelyn cut him off. "Are you accusing my son of a crime? Or are you afraid because he's more learned than your stereotype of what a young black man should be?" Trey stood silently, stunned by his mother's forcefulness. Evelyn pulled out a tablet and tapped the screen, displaying the recording from his chest camera. The whole interaction, from the false accusation to the officer's treatment of Trey. "Did you know," Evelyn said, turning to Marlo, "that merely carrying a backpack and reading a book is not a crime? That your attempt to intimidate my son violates Federal Statute 42 U.S.C. FAR of 1983 on abuse of authority?" Marlo stammered. I was just following orders." Evelyn's gaze shifted to Sharon. "And you, madam, did you know that a false police report motivated by racial bias is a violation of civil rights and actionable under law?" Sharon's hand shook with the phone, now useless in her grasp. Her confident demeanor was gone, replaced by pale silence. Officer Carter, meanwhile, was quietly contacting dispatch. Trey's heart shifted from a cold knot of fear to a cautious warmth. Relief flooded in. His mother's arrival had turned the tide. But it wasn't just relief. It was a fierce pride. His mother wasn't just a soldier. She was a force of nature, a storm of justice wrapped in discipline and love. The events of that night didn't fade quietly. 2 days later, Sharon Brooks received a summons. She was being sued for false reporting and racial discrimination. Officer Carter was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. Marlo was sent for additional training. Meanwhile, the video of the incident exploded across social media. Evelyn was hailed as the Storm Mom, a powerful symbol of standing up for her child against systemic bias. News outlets interviewed her and sparked wide conversations about racial profiling and police misconduct. Even the local school where Trey was enrolled invited Evelyn to speak about civil rights and leadership, turning the incident into a teaching moment for the whole community. One evening, as Evelyn showed Trey the invitation letter, she smiled and asked, "Will you come with me?" Trey closed his heavy books and looked up at his mother with a new sense of purpose. Always. No longer was law just something he read about in books. Now, it was a shield, a weapon, and a hope, especially when wielded by those who truly understood its power. The evening air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming jasmine as the black Tesla Model X glided to a stop by the curb. The vehicle's sleek silhouette cut a sharp contrast against the suburban calm of Fall Creek, the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, or thought they did. But tonight, something was about to disrupt the carefully cultivated peace. From the driver's side stepped Evelyn Marshall, her every movement measured and precise, as if shaped by decades of military discipline and unyielding will. The dark navy suit she wore was tailored perfectly, hugging her tall frame with an authority that spoke louder than words. Her silver-streaked hair, pulled back into a no-nonsense bun, framed a face etched with years of battles fought, not just on distant fields, but within the labyrinth of bureaucracy and prejudice. She did not glance at the gathering crowd of neighbors who had begun to peek from behind curtains or step onto porches. Her eyes were fixed firmly on the officers who still had their hands on Trey, her son. "Officers," she began, her voice crisp like the crack of a military command. "I am Colonel Evelyn Marshall, United States Air Force, retired, and this young man is my son. I'm going to ask you, no, I am instructing you, to remove your hands from him immediately." Officer Carter's hand tightened near his holster. His lips parted as if to protest. But Evelyn was already stepping forward, the calm power in her posture daring him to challenge her. I'm aware you received a complaint from one of the neighborhood residents, she continued. But I want to know, are you accusing my son of a crime? Or are you merely afraid of the truth he represents? The crowd, now swelling with curiosity and murmurs, fell silent as Evelyn turned her gaze toward the officers and then, sharply, toward Sharon Brooks, who had stepped back, her smile evaporating into something close to fear. Evelyn's hand moved smoothly to her bag, pulling out a tablet. With a few taps, she projected the footage recorded by the small camera pinned to Trey's chest. Every moment of the interaction laid bare. Sharon's suspicious glance, the officer's immediate escalation, Trey's calm attempts to explain himself. "Did you know," Evelyn said, addressing the officers, "that carrying a backpack and reading a book on a public sidewalk is not a crime? And that unlawfully detaining a citizen based on racial profiling is a violation of 42 U.S.C. Section 1983? Her voice was quiet, but every word resonated like a gavel striking the bench. Officer Marlowe, the younger, less confident of the two, took an involuntary step back, the weight of her words sinking in. Carter, the senior officer, lowered his eyes. Sharon, now trembling, gripped her phone like a lifeline but didn't dare speak. Evelyn's eyes never left Sharon as she continued. "And you, madam, did you understand that making a false police report with racial intent is not merely a social faux pas, but a punishable offense?" The woman paled, her confidence drained by the cold fire in Evelyn's voice. A soft murmur rose from the small crowd, but Evelyn's focus never wavered. "Officer Carter, I suggest you reconsider the basis of your investigation before you proceed. This isn't just about my son. It's about every child who has been made to feel unsafe in his own community." The tension cracked like thunder. Carter reached for his radio, fingers shaking slightly as he called dispatch. "We have a civil rights complaint here, requesting guidance." The moment hung heavy in the air. Trey felt his breath come easier, the sharp claws of anxiety loosening their grip. Relief bloomed, tempered by pride. His mother wasn't just a soldier who had fought in foreign lands. She was a warrior who would fight here, on the streets he called home. That night, the story unfolded beyond the quiet cul-de-sacs of Fall Creek. Videos from Trey's camera spread like wildfire across social media platforms, igniting heated debates about racial profiling and police overreach. News anchors dubbed Evelyn the Storm Mom, a symbol of unwavering strength and maternal protection in the face of systemic injustice. Interviews followed. Panels discussed the deeper issues plaguing law enforcement and the communities they served. The local school where Trey studied reached out, inviting Evelyn to speak on civil rights, leadership, and the power of standing up for what's right. Sitting together at the kitchen table a few days later, Evelyn showed Trey the letter from the principal, the official invitation to speak in front of students and parents alike. "Are you going to go with me?" she asked gently. Trey looked up from the heavy law book spread before him, eyes bright with determination. "Always," he said softly. His fingers traced the spines of the books, no longer just pages filled with legal jargon, but shields and weapons forged from knowledge and truth. But the road to justice was never smooth. Sharon Brooks's neighbors whispered as she passed by. Her reputation in the community was forever altered. The police department launched an internal investigation, placing Officer Carter on administrative leave and sending Marlowe for sensitivity and anti-bias training. Still, there were those who questioned Evelyn's forcefulness, painting her as overbearing or aggressive, a mother who didn't know when to step back. Evelyn knew this was part of the fight. "I didn't raise him to shrink," she told Trey one night as they sat on their porch beneath the stars. "I raised him to stand tall, to never be silenced." Trey's voice was steady. I want to make sure no other kid has to go through what I did. She smiled, proud but tired. And you will. Together, we will. In the days that followed, life in Fall Creek began to shift subtly. The neighbors who once glanced suspiciously at teenagers walking with backpacks now looked twice, some with quiet respect, others with lingering unease. Teachers in Trey's school whispered about the courage it took to stand up to authority. Friends sent him messages of encouragement, and through it all, Trey carried his books, not just as tools of study, but as symbols of resilience. Proof that knowledge was power, but only if wielded with courage and heart. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn found Trey outside, standing beneath the street lamp, the books still in his arms. She approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're ready?" she said simply. He nodded. For what comes next? Because the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. 2 days after the confrontation that had shaken Fall Creek to its core, the ripple effects were impossible to ignore. Sharon Brooks, once a respected neighbor who prided herself on keeping her streets safe, now faced a summons to appear in court. The civil suit filed by Colonel Evelyn Marshall was more than just a personal grievance. It was a statement against fear-driven injustice, against the poison of racial profiling that had long seeped into communities and law enforcement. Her phone rang endlessly with calls from reporters, lawyers, and local activists. Social media users dissected every word of her false accusation, flooding her inbox with sharp rebukes and calls for accountability. At the police department, Officer Carter was suspended pending investigation. The department's internal affairs office moved swiftly under public pressure, intent on demonstrating a commitment to reform. Officer Marlowe, the rookie who had followed orders without question, was enrolled in an intensive anti-bias and civil rights training program, an effort to change more than just one person. But the real change, the kind that wouldn't be captured in headlines or official reports, was happening in the hearts and minds of the people of Fall Creek. At the community center, Evelyn stood before a crowded room of parents, teachers, and students. Her uniform had been swapped for a simple blazer, but the discipline, the authority, and the fierce love still radiated from her every word. Justice is not just a word in a book or a line in the law, she said, voice steady and clear. It's a shield for those who cannot always protect themselves. It's the courage to stand up when others turn away. Trey sat in the front row, his books stacked neatly on his lap, eyes fixed on his mother with a mixture of awe and determination. This was his world now, the world he was prepared to fight for. After the speech, a mother approached Evelyn. "Thank you," she said softly. "My son was stopped by the police last month. He's just a kid trying to get home. I'm scared for him." Evelyn nodded, understanding more deeply than anyone could say. "Well, that fear isn't yours alone, but we can change it. We will change it." Meanwhile, in the quiet confines of their home, the legal battle unfolded with weighty seriousness. Sharon's legal team argued denial and mistaken identity, but the evidence was overwhelming. Trey's camera footage was irrefutable. The recorded conversation laid bare the prejudice that fueled the incident. Expert witnesses testified on the psychological harm caused by racial profiling. Community members spoke out about the pervasive fear and mistrust that had long festered beneath Fall Creek's surface. The judge's demeanor was somber as he reviewed the case. When the final ruling came, it was decisive. The court found in favor of the Marshalls. Sharon Brooks was ordered to pay damages for the emotional distress caused to Trey, and the city was mandated to implement new training programs for the police force to address implicit bias and civil rights. The verdict sent a clear message. Justice will not tolerate fear or prejudice masquerading as vigilance. That afternoon, as the news spread, the Marshall family gathered in their modest living room. Evelyn pulled Trey into a firm embrace, whispering, "You stood your ground. You made a difference." Trey smiled, exhausted but radiant. "I just want to keep learning, to help others." Evelyn held his face in her hands. "And you will, because justice isn't just a law in a book. It's the armor you wear every day, with knowledge, courage, and heart." In the weeks that followed, Fall Creek began to heal. Community forums were organized, local leaders invited residents to discuss fears, hopes, and the work needed to build true safety and trust. Police officers who had once been distant and defensive now participated in workshops, listening to the voices they had ignored for too long. At school, Trey became a quiet leader. He tutored classmates, helping them understand their rights and the power of education. His story inspired others to speak up, to stand tall, and to demand justice, not only for themselves, but for their neighbors. And then, one spring morning, Trey stood before a new audience, a packed auditorium at his school. The principal introduced Evelyn Marshall as a guest speaker, a woman who had transformed their community. Evelyn began, "Justice has many uniforms. Mine came with medals and ranks. But the most important uniform is the one you wear every day, the armor of your convictions, the shield of your knowledge, and the sword of your voice." Trey's voice rose with quiet confidence as he took the microphone. "Now, justice is not just about courts or laws. It's about fairness, respect, and standing up when someone is judged by the color of their skin instead of the content of their character." The crowd erupted in applause. Among the faces in the sea of students were many who had once felt powerless, invisible. Today, they saw themselves in Trey. They saw hope. Back home that night, Trey opened his law books once again. The journey ahead was long, filled with challenges, but he was ready. For every page he read, every case he studied, was another step toward a future where no child would be stopped, searched, or doubted just for walking home. And as he looked at his mother, Evelyn, the warrior, the protector, he knew this was only the beginning. Together, they had sparked a change. Together, they would keep the fight alive. Justice had worn its uniform that night in Fall Creek, and it had won.